pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
First item tonight is approval of the agenda this evening.
I move the board approve the agenda as presented.
Second.
Denise, when you're ready.
AJ,
Yes.
Dan,
Yes.
Kim Marie,
Yes.
Drew,
Yes.
Karen,
Yes.
Angie,
Yes.
Nick,
Yes.
motion carries.
And into honoring excellence this evening.
Good evening, everyone. Good to be here this evening as part of Honoring Excellence to kick things off. It's hard to believe that it was almost a month ago we had our Rise and Shine at the K event at Kauffman Stadium to kick off the school year for our staff. And as part of the program that morning, we recognized staff with our annual Years of Service awards. Following the event, it was brought to our attention that some of our staff had been inadvertently missed as part of the introductions and presentations. So tonight we wanted to publicly recognize these staff members and give them an official LPS thank you for dedicating their respective careers to Liberty Public Schools. Several of them are with us tonight. There are several that had prior commitments, and for those we'll be sure to present them in their buildings later this week. So we'll present them one by one with their plaque, and then the Royals were so kind to also take their photos on the Crown Vision, and we were able to get, you'll get one, but not one, but two awards here this evening. And again, our apologies for missing that last month. So I am going to introduce our first guest, I hope. Rob, I might just, oh, actually, I'm glad that you pulled that up, because we do want to, before we get into these recognitions, we want to give a big congrats to Epic Elementary. We've had them on the docket to be recognized tonight. Dr. Schmitz informed me yesterday that they have some PD that a large chunk of their staff are at tonight. So we're going to catch them coming up in October. So that is that. So thank you, Rob. And if we'd advance and introduce again Crystal Bird from Liberty High School, 10 years of service. She is not with us tonight, but we will give her a round of applause. Crystal. Crystal Holthaus, 10 years of service. She's from the DAC. We'll be presenting her with her awards upstairs, one floor from here tomorrow. So let's give Crystal. I almost said Crystal again, but we're moving to Lisa Johnston. Lisa is with us here from the DAC. Lisa with 15 years of service. Lisa, congratulations. Next, Mark Warner, 15 years of service.
All right, Dallas, to put you on the spot, where's Mark at? Where is he working at? What building?
Oh, I'm sorry. Liberty North.
Liberty North.
Liberty North.
Good, perfect.
Sorry about that.
Sorry, I didn't know that one.
Next, we have Kurt Raven, District Administration Center. We have Megan Johnson, Manor Hill Elementary, 20 years of service, not with us tonight. Congratulations. Also from Manor Hill, we'll be heading over to see the Patriots tomorrow, 25 years of service, Diana Page. And finally, 25 years of service, the Blue Jay, Mr. Chris Murphy. So again, congratulations to those recipients, and we appreciate all they have done for Liberty Public Schools. And finally, I'm going to do a quick read on a final item in a video premiere. We always like the video premieres. In recent years, you've likely seen or heard the hashtag or phrase we often share is simply this, in this together, LPS. The video presentation we're about to watch would certainly fit into this theme. Lewis and Clark Elementary second grade teacher Michaela Baker has quite impressive resume during her 22-year tenure as a teacher in LPS. In fact, she's a former LPS District Teacher of the Year recipient back in 2013. But what she did for a family in need last December is something quite extraordinary. As we found out from her last week, organ donation had not been something she had given much thought to until there was a friend and family in desperate need. Lewis and Clark Elementary teacher Michaela Baker and Shoal Creek Elementary 5th grade teacher Amy Goodman have a bond and friendship that will now live forever. And thanks to Michaela's incredible act, she has provided Amy and her family with the gift of time to have with their husband and father, Robert. Please take a look.
I think I was like 35 when I first found out I had this issue with my kidneys. The biopsy finally showed that I had what's called FSGS for short. It's basically scarring of the kidneys.
It was just so much uncertainty. You know, he was on dialysis. I had a dialysis machine in my bedroom, for Pete's sakes. Like, it was a whole different reality. Been in the district, I think it's my 13th year. So my first job was second grade here at Lewis and Clark.
This is my 22nd year as a classroom teacher at Liberty Public Schools, and I have served all of those years here at Lewis and Clark. I met the Goodmans about 20 years ago. I first met them when my son was born and Amy was my parents' teacher's coordinator, and then later learned that she was a neighbor. Robert was my son's youth Little League baseball coach. Amy became a teacher here at Lewis and Clark, taught across the hall, and I got to be her mentor while she was here. So we've just maintained this friendship in and out of each other's lives, but always that constant.
June of 20 that I was finally listed as being able to go onto the donor list.
You know, you're told if you're on the list, you could wait 5 years. We just didn't know what was going to become of all of this.
I learned that they had people within their inner circle try to be a donor, and none of those people were successful.
And when I was tested and I wasn't a match, it was devastating. So I needed someone to step up.
Michaela, she had known about my issues for years, and she stepped up and said, hey, I'll be tested right away. She's no hesitation.
I just called her one day and I said, I think I want to try this. I want to try to be a donor for you.
You never expect somebody to step forward and do this, right? But of all the people I know, she is the one that I would have thought maybe.
And it was just many steps over about a 6-month period. I kept progressing, you know, with each step and each stage. And then I realized, okay, we're gonna do this. I had great support from my family. I had great support from Lewis and Clark. I do love that my classroom was with me on this journey because I had to explain to them what I was doing. Of course, they had some really great questions and concerns for me, as 7- and 8-year-olds would do. And they wanted to know if I would, when I came back, if I would look different or if I would walk different, which I thought was great.
To have Michaela step up and volunteer to go into a hospital and have an operation that she didn't have to help save somebody's life is just it's incredible.
December 7th came and we went into surgery, and I love that he was in one room, I was in the next room, and you know, my kidney came out, went right on into him.
There's people that live their lifetime waiting for a kidney, and to have somebody just step up and say, hey, let's do this, it was amazing.
Donating an organ to someone outside your family, like, it's unbelievable what she did. I mean, we're like family now. There's no going back.
It makes me feel good that I could give this family the gift of time.
I couldn't be more grateful than I am to her and her family.
Neither of them could be with us tonight, but they did want to pass along their appreciation. And gosh, what a great story, and a true hashtag in this together LPS. And the best part of my job is being able to be a small part of that and sharing those type of stories. So we'll get to share that with the community coming up later this week. And again, we appreciate your attention here this evening. And that concludes Honoring Excellence for tonight.
Thank you, Dallas. Appreciate
Thank you,
that.
Dallas.
Great things. Hey, we're going to take just a few minutes before public comments. I know some of the folks here on the board would like to congratulate those who are here who received some awards. But before we do that, if you do want to have public comment, I do have one blue card out there. Just submit that to Denise, and she'll get it to us so we can get you set up. So we'll take 5 minutes. 7:21.
7:20. Look at that man.
Want to go down?
Trying to pull AJ.
All right, as we move into public comment this evening, just a reminder, speakers may address any subject concerning Liberty Public Schools and/or education. Board members will not engage in debates or discussions with those speaking other than to seek clarification of their comments. Speakers will address the board from the podium. Ask to keep remarks concise and to the point, and please do not repeat anything someone has said before. A person or persons may speak only once at the meeting. Certainly if we have several patrons wishing to speak on the same topic, we may restrict that input to one or two spokespersons, but we have one tonight, so no concern there. Limit is 3 minutes. Certainly no profane language or comments that constitute a threat to the safety of others. That's prohibited. Spontaneous comments from the audience not tolerated and may close public comment. Again, the board will not address concerns brought forward during public comment, but rather work through administration to appropriately respond to patron questions. So Amanda Woldruff, please.
Hi, good evening. I'm Amanda, and this is my son, Noah Woldruff. He is a first grader at Warren Hills Elementary School, and he also happens to have Down syndrome and autism. I'm here tonight to bring awareness to an area where the district is greatly lacking in accessibility and equity for all students. I believe a rapid improvement process needs to be implemented to restructure Liberty's before and after school program, Kids Zone. In its current state, Kids Zone is denying access to students based on their disabilities. For 2 years in a row, my child was abruptly excluded from the Kids Zone program. Both years, I communicated his disabilities ahead of time and was assured that accommodations would be made. However, despite having a processed application, confirmation of enrollment, and processed payment, he was unexpectedly dismissed from the program. Last year, I was told on the first day of school that he could not continue attending because he wore pull-ups. This year, I was told the night before the first day of school that unfortunately Noah would not be welcome into the program. No explanation was given other than the inability to accommodate his disabilities. Kids Zone states in their accommodations section of their parent handbook, quote, Kids Zone is responsive to individual differences among children. Attempts are made to meet the individual needs of each child by working closely with families, teachers, and specialists, providing special materials, training staff, adjusting ratios, and adapting space are ways that the Kids Zone program seeks to meet the needs of all children. The first week of school, I met with Dr. Cook, Dr. Westfall, Mr. Anderson, and Director of Kids Zone, Mrs. Brown. I was told at that meeting that no accommodations would be trialed for my son. It was explained to me that this decision was justified because including my son or other children with similar disabilities would, quote, alter the fundamental nature of the program, end quote. Further discussion revealed that the program is selectively inclusive of students with only marginal differences in abilities. Examples given of accommodations were allowing a student to wear noise-canceling headphones or dimming the lights. My call to action is that LPS make it their mission to serve the underserved by pursuing a culture that provides equal opportunity to all children, even outside the mandated school hours. If students with disabilities are not allowed to attend Kids Zone because it will alter the fundamental nature of the program, then there is something very off base with the nature of the program. A rapid improvement process needs to be implemented to create a program that includes, welcomes, and accommodates children of all abilities. Those same children that are welcome in your building from 9 to 4, and yet unwelcome if it falls outside of those mandated parameters. Inclusion is not just charity for one, but a gift for all. So let's elevate LPS to be an example of enhanced inclusion, diversity, accessibility, so that all children may be welcomed and supported. Thank you for your time and your attention to this matter.
Thank you, Ms. Woldruff. Appreciate it. into Section 4, Consent Agenda. As a reminder, adopted rules of parliamentary procedure, Robert's rules provide for consent agenda listing several items for approval of the board by a single motion. Documentation concerning these items has been provided to all board members and the public in advance to assure an extensive and thorough review. Items may be removed from the consent agenda at the request of any board member. Do I have a motion for consent agenda?
I move the board approve consent agenda items 4.01 to 4.07.
Second.
Denise, when you're ready.
AJ,
Yes.
Dan,
Yes.
Kim Marie,
Yes.
Drew,
Yes.
Karen,
Yes.
Angie,
Yes.
Nick.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Into Section 5, reports from the administration.
First item is 5.01, and that is our Innovation and Learning Report. We are going to welcome Dr. Julie Moore to the podium to share out this evening.
Good evening. I know Dallas mentioned this, but from Innovation and Learning, we wanted to start with congratulating Epic Elementary, who was recognized as the National Blue Ribbon School. 297 schools nationwide have been recognized. Dr. Schmitz and her team will be recognized in D.C. In early November. This month, we have several program reviews, including work from early childhood, A+ at both high schools, student services, athletics, college and career readiness, and community partnerships. One highlight from the back to school review that I wanted to mention was the work of our AVID teams at both high schools. AVID at Liberty North was certified as an emerging school-wide site, and Liberty High School was certified as an AVID school-wide. Say that again. Liberty North was emerging school-wide, and Liberty High is certified as AVID school-wide. For Liberty High School, so you get different levels of certification, and AVID school-wide, which is what Liberty High School got, is one level beyond next to being a school of distinction, which is pretty cool, because then that's where other schools want to come and kind of see what you're doing with AVID. So I had the opportunity to go to both schools, Liberty High School today and Liberty North last week, and see the great things that they're doing in those programs and starting to do some of the work school-wide. In addition, I'd like to highlight the work of our buildings and their building improvement plans in the back to school program review. Every building has 2 goals. One of those goals is focused on belonging, and the other goal is focused on academics. And they used data provided by the Department of Innovation and Learning to inform their goal setting. We'll have 3 check-ins throughout the year with Dr. Seahorn, Dr. Westfall, and myself to see how they're progressing on those goals. And then we are getting ready to start scheduling some visits for people to go out to the schools and see all the great things that are going on. Also included in this review is the district scorecard. Changes to any scores or data will come in October for that. And then you also have the assessment plan for the school year. With that, I'll take any questions.
How many levels are in the AVID?
4.
Okay.
Yes. So Liberty North is on the 2nd,
Okay.
Liberty High is on the 3rd, and then the final one is
distinction.
Distinction. Yes.
I also wanted to say I like the theme. It is very positive, and the fact that you are combining those 2 goals. I mean, they have 2 separate ones, but the thought process is we're continuing the work, and this is where we're going next.
Yes.
And we're moving forward, and so.
And they're telling their story as they
Yes,
go.
and they're telling their story by reaching their goals. I like it. Plus, you know, you write nicely, so it's always fun to read those. I love the first pages. You guys know that. They're the best part. Thank you for the other 10 things on your list.
One of those 10 things, since you brought it up, is the district report card, and wanted to clarify something there. That is the prior year's information. As we collect data for the 22-23 school year, our timeline for submission of that data is not until November for the bulk of that. That then will reflect our district report card for 2022-2023. So just wanted to draw that distinction for you. That is in addition to our LPS scorecard. So a lot of data to look at, whether it's reports we provide you from the district or something that DESE provides as far as what is DESE generated.
But they're great graphics.
Yeah. Other questions of Dr. Moore or Dr. Westfall this evening?
All right, Dr. Moore, give me I should know this, but give me a reminder of AVID and the benefits of it.
So the goal of AVID is to work with first generation college students, and so helping them learn how to take notes, helping them through their schoolwork, and then helping them with the process of finding what the career colleges, so visiting colleges. I was last week in the senior group, and they were working through financial aid and researching that and how to look for scholarships, and then determining like what their next steps are in that process. While if you go to a freshman class, they're working on focused notes, and so how do you get into high school and how do you learn to take notes properly instead of just highlighting everything? And then as you get into your junior year, you start talking about the college process and so forth. So there's a curriculum for each level, but it's really about getting kids college and career ready, or whatever it is. It used to be really focused on college, and now they've made it college and career, so whatever it is you want to do. But a lot of times those first generation college students, they don't know, since they may not have someone at home to help them and guide them. This is the whole goal is to kind of help guide them through that process.
Perfect, thank you.
And this is the 5th year?
Yeah.
It's already 5?
Yes. Crazy. Yeah.
That's amazing. It's amazing.
Dr. Moore, I was looking through the building improvement plans, scanning, I might say. A lot to go through, but I did notice the Heritage Middle School plan has very specific goals based on iReady diagnostics and things, and I would seem to be the only one that had that detailed, and a lot of the other ones referred to NEE indicators, which I would have to look up to know what any of those mean. But anyway, I was just curious as to why one is shown one way and others are.
So typically we would want them to have something more general that everyone can work on, but when some schools looked at their test scores, maybe from a previous year, they felt like that was an area based on those scores that they really needed to focus on. So we allowed them to do that. So it's not typical to say we're going to focus on maybe ELA or math, but because of some of the scores that they've maybe had and feel like they need to grow, we've allowed them to do that.
Right, but I guess to me it's because this was to me what I guess I was expecting to see coming off of COVID and some of the gapped learning that may have occurred. To me, this is that kind of thing that shows me that we're chasing it, I guess. Anyway, just one of the differences noted, and like I said, I haven't studied them in detail, but that one did stick out because it did seem to dive into that data. So anyway, I appreciate seeing that.
Yes.
And I guess.
Yeah, and I think some others will do that. They'll just try to do it on a larger scale, and we'll focus on reading and trying to grow all students, but using a specific diagnostic and being that specific kind of shows that they know what their area of improvement is.
Right.
And to add to that, your data team structures at every campus do that annually as they're monitoring not only their end-of-year performance with MAP or EOC data, but that ongoing iReady piece. And I know Mr. Hand is here that could spend the rest of the night kind of walking us through that. It just is a matter of what gets elevated into those improvement plans, which then is what differs from building the buildings.
And Christopher met with them at our principals retreat this summer and sat down and provided them all of this data and said, look at this, and then go back, and they met as teams, as Dr. Tucker said, they met as their data teams and said, what do we need to really focus on?
But these building improvement plans is where that should be captured, as far as anything
it won't be
unique.
it won't be their only goal, but maybe they're big. This is the big one that we need to focus on. But they definitely have other ones, and they work on those during their early release times on Wednesdays. So each of those departments has a specific goal that they also work on, and then they collect data to see how the students are doing.
And each assessment window gives you a snapshot into that grade level or those individual students' performance. So that first iReady administration to the second to the third allows you to truly diagnose and adjust instruction. So then I think that's where that plays out at the teacher level, but then that grade level is the departments collaborating. I think if it's a big enough issue, it might land in that improvement plan goal category. So, yeah. great questions.
Right, I think, and we, on the scorecard, is that the right thing to refer to?
That's correct.
Scorecard, fall scorecard. I think one of the things that parents are interested in is, as we sit here in 2022, and the pandemic's over, according to the interview on 60 Minutes, so that's good. And I think one of the things is not just how we compared against the state, but how are we doing coming out of the pandemic? What was lost?
Sure.
Where are we at? What do we need to do, and what are we doing about it? And the more that this type of graphic can help us get there, I think that's, I guess, to me as a parent in 2022, that's kind of the thing, even more so than how we compare to the state. And the more we can communicate that in a simple way, I think that would be beneficial for the district and for the parents.
And hopefully teachers will, and we'll make sure to reiterate this, but I know that my son just brought home, he's in 3rd grade, he just brought home his iReady scores, and I was able to see his past ones.
Right.
And I was like, oh, okay,
Right.
this is where you were last year, and here's
Right.
where you are comparatively. So as long as parents get those from
Yep.
their, either emailed or in their green folder that comes home in their backpack, that they can see some of that progress or lack of.
Which, to tag on to that, I mean, that is one of the beauties, at least from that iReady standpoint of, great, my kid is here today, not,
Yeah.
I'm going to test them in spring and hope they learned what I thought they were going to learn,
Right.
right? So I certainly recognize that, what you're bringing up, Dan, and being able to see that today. And what's crazy to me is the forecast, right? So estimated progress that they should be able to make, whether or not they're going to be in grade level, and what I, as a parent, need to take on, whether that's extra assistance or whatever, to help them get where they need to be, is incredibly impactful.
Other questions of Dr. Moore or Dr. Westfall this evening?
I just wanted to make a point I really appreciated the student services survey, the update from the student services standpoint, because there was some information at the end about the Missouri student survey data related to drug and alcohol and vaping use. Angie and I were at the LAFI meeting last week where some of that was discussed. It was under embargo, but it's nice to see that data out here now. And so I'll be interested to see how the district works with LAFI and in the community to
It's a wonderful partnership.
so respond to that and come up with a plan for addressing concerns raised.
Absolutely.
Julie, I was looking at the high school athletic participation, and both Liberty North and Liberty High are above 50%. Is that progress? Is that where we've been? Because one of the things that I'm looking at here is that there's a great deal of social, emotional learning that takes place in those events. So how do we grow that more?
What has been helpful in looking at the data is that students are participating in more than one sport. And so that's really nice that they're not just specializing in one, so that students are being active. So a lot of times you'll see, someone who might just be a baseball, they want to just do baseball, but they're playing football in the fall, or they're playing basketball, and then they're going and doing that. So those numbers have increased quite a bit.
Okay.
Yeah. Always more, we've added a few C teams in order to not cut students in a few sports such as soccer and tennis. We've added a couple of C teams in order to give students more opportunities as well, which helps.
Great, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
And we added a couple sports at the middle level a couple of years ago, right? Provided
We
funding
added
for that.
7th grade
Seventh grade.
for
Yeah.
wrestling and what's the other one?
Cross country.
Cross country.
Cross country, that's right.
Yes.
One more question, sorry to keep
Okay.
you up there, but it has to do with the college and career report, and that the internship and the Network 53, the numbers presented, how does that compare to prior years? Are we trending up, or do you
Yes.
know? Okay.
Quickly. Yes, we actually just did a 3 to 5 year trend today. I can't remember how many years we put on there, but We started, what was it, Dr. Tucker, just a few years ago, we had like 40 or 50, and now we're at
So specifically for
170.
Network 53, it's timely that you asked this, by the way.
Right.
So this is as of 3 o'clock this afternoon. So in the 2018-19 school year, we started with 10 kiddos in Network 53. And so then year upon year to present, it went from 10 to 54 to 72 to 162, and then this year it's 173. And again, Network 53 being student placement and internships. Couple that with your Northland CAPS program. We've seen that fluctuate a little bit because kids have a lot more choices now. We carve out 100 seats each year for NCAPS. Our current enrollment is 73. It has been as high in the last 5 years as 99. Real quickly to run through some of the other programs, Northland Career Center has 55 students presently. It holds pretty steady year upon year. Excelsior Springs Career Center has 44 students. KC Tech Academy has, we believe, 4 students presently. We're working on getting that data. Another one that we have grown through board action over these last 4 years, we started early college in 19 and 20. We started that program with 20 students. The following year, 42 students, then 52. This current year is 67 students. And another notable program, which is in support of the education profession, is our EIP, which is our educator internship program. And that currently sits at 140 students. So if we can add those up pretty quickly, that's our experiential learning, real world learning, market value asset conversation to date as far as where our students are at.
So even though Northland CAPS may be down versus prior years, it's
Our numbers
accentuated by
overall
all
are
these-
still up.
Yeah, they're up, yeah.
And I think the important takeaway too is that it's not saturated. Not every single student has these types of experiences because they may opt for more dual credit or more AP that then gets them their MVA or client-based project or entrepreneurial experience like we've talked about. So it's all of that bundled together that on our scorecard gets us closer to that 74% that we're reporting over these last several years of students that have attained at least one market value asset. What else? You've been up there a lot.
Yeah, I'll be back too.
We're going to hear from her again.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Warren. Next up is 5.02, our Office of Equity, and we'll welcome Dr. Dixon Seahorn to the podium.
Good evening. I am going to highlight just 2 items out of my report. The first is the Equity in Schools grant opportunity. As you know, we did apply for that grant. We asked for $250,000. We could have asked for $300,000, but we have already added our own money into the pot in-house, and so we felt that that was a reasonable amount to ask for the things that we want to do as itemized here in the report. And so we are now happy to announce that we actually have received half of those funds for year 1. As you know, the grant is for 2 years, the 22-23 school year and the 23-24 school year. So we do have a couple of things we want to tackle, and one of them that I have already expressed that I'm most excited about is the opportunity for equity in real world learning by way of those 8th grade students being able to go to college campuses, career centers, so on and so forth. And so we're looking forward to, now that we have the grant funding, to make that happen this school year. So Colleen Jones and I've already had some conversations about it. This actually happens to be the focal point, if you've had an opportunity to review it, her equity action plan and SMARTY goals for this year. And so we're going to get right on that and make that one happen. And so just wanted to share that with you, that we've now received half of the money. We'll receive that for year 1 and the other half for year 2. I also wanted to speak to very briefly about the PD that we've already implemented as of this school year in partnership with the Core Collaborative. As you are aware, those are our equity partners. And so we've already had one opportunity during DLT for our district leadership team to be engaged with the Core Collaborative. We did have a lead facilitator and 2 implementers. The lead facilitator was ill but able to be with us virtually, and the 2 implementers were here in person. And so we basically made almost a whole day out of this experience. So there was the 2.5 hours in the morning where they joined us for whole group professional learning, and then in the afternoon we had the 2 implementers meet with school leaders in small groups, and then the lead facilitator, again virtually, met with directors on both the academic and the operations side of the organization. And we were just having some more in-depth conversations to kind of get us ready for deeper work that will happen this year. So we are leading up to, in October, some on-site coaching and support sessions that will happen in school buildings with school leaders and their equity cadres. And so school leaders will have the autonomy to determine who will be a part of those equity cadres. And we're talking about certified staff as well as classroom teachers and other certified staff members. So we're very, very excited about that opportunity that's coming up here real soon. Those sessions will be half day in each building during the week of October 3rd. So just wanted to share those as highlights for the evening, and so we will entertain hopefully just a few questions this evening.
Questions of Dr. Dixon Seahorn?
We may have spent them all.
No, I am curious. I know you guys have already started some of the planning. What are can you share some of the colleges you're planning on visiting?
Well, one of them for sure will be William Jewell College. We've also had some conversations about possibly UMKC, Northwest Missouri State. So these are the ones we're putting on the table. But Colleen for sure has already made contact with William Jewell College.
Sure.
So no bias there, but hey, it just has happened like that. So we have some others in mind, but it's just something we need to kind of start putting that plan in motion.
And then will students opt into which visit they may want to attend to? How are we going to work through that?
We're still trying to figure that out. That's actually a part of the steps outlined in her equity action plan, and there may have to be an opportunity for students to kind of opt in, where we kind of provide this, and using this old archaic term, a smorgasbord.
Sure.
If you will, and then you can kind of choose career center option and or college visit, and then of course with parental consent, and ensure that every student can have, 8th grade student can have an opportunity to experience this opportunity for real world learning.
Very cool.
So, Dr. Dixon Seahorn, on the equity cadre, the purpose of those is?
I'm glad you asked, because I just put this in an email today as a reminder to school leaders. So this is part of our belonging work that we had established long before the grant opportunity. And so for so long, we've been laying the foundation around our equity work at the district level. And now it is time to take it to the building level. So the purpose is basically to think about the equity action plans, SMARTY goals, belonging goals that are outlined in the school improvement plans, and to think about how we take that work to scale within our own buildings. Each building has its own subculture, if you will. And so it's really about engaging beyond just school leadership, who are part of the district leadership team, and getting insights and input and engaging other team members within those school buildings. So that's why we want to have as much representation of both our classified support staff as well as certified teachers, so that each school can build its own culture of belonging and dignity. And we have lots of work to do, and so it's going to take many people coming to the table to weigh in on how that happens in each school setting.
So has administration been given like a guideline on how big, small those cadres are going to be, or is that left up?
Absolutely. So one of the things that we looked at was just student enrollment. So we just kind of said, okay, so if you have a school community that's less than 400 students, then you can establish a cadre of somewhere between 4 to 6 people, kind of half and half where possible, classified, certified staff. If you're a school community with less than, I believe the number was 800, it's around 6 to 8 people. And then for the 2 high schools being over 1,000 students, then they would be allowed up to 10 members of their cadre. And again, we're trying to aim for half and half. We know that may not always be feasible, but we're aiming for that as a goal.
Okay.
And that has been clearly communicated over and over again. So we're going to do our best to make that happen.
This is kind of a selfish question, and it doesn't necessarily have to be an answer, but it's more to kind of maybe plant a seed for the board. I'm thinking back to our book study and some of our sessions where we, talked with the authors and went through some of their steps in developing a culture of belonging. I look at these opportunities and I'm kind of thinking, well, I think maybe we need the opportunity as a board to refresh on some of those and talk through them. And so one of the things I wanted to mention was, if you can think of opportunities for us as board members on how we can kind of plug in on some of that, please let us know.
Awesome. I think it can fall under potentially with the new grant opportunity expanded. PD is that first bullet as led by the core collaborative lead team, the facilitation team. So that may be an opportunity for us to fold in reconnecting the board with this work. Not that you're disconnected, but just, keeping things, constant touch points. So, all right.
Or if there's any of the other things that you have planned already that we could
Plug into.
sit in on, I think that might be helpful also.
Okay. Thank you.
The other thing to note is that as MSIP 6 rolls out, we're seeing more of that focus pulled into accountability and assessment in terms of MSIP 6 standards. So by way of that reporting, you'll see more standards and more accountability within this space than you've seen in prior MSIP 6 cycle or MSIP versions. So you'll see it there as well. Other questions for Dr. Seahorn? Anything else? Okay.
I think I'll run while
Thank
I
you.
can.
While you can. 5.03, we're going to hear from Ms. Sullivan, but we're also going to hear from her a little bit later on in the agenda. So welcome to the podium.
Just to give her an out for questions?
Yeah, right.
Not happening.
I think you're exhausted on your questions, right?
No, we haven't.
It was worth a shot, right? Good evening. It's good to be with you tonight. I have 2 donations to recognize for you this evening. A monetary donation from the M. Brody and Amy Pershawn Family Charitable Gift Fund in the amount of $2,500 to the LHS Liberty High School Freshman Football Program, and a monetary donation from M. Brody and Amy Pershawn Family Charitable Gift Fund in the amount of $3,000, broken down as follows: $1,000 to Shoal Creek Elementary to use for benefit of all students, $1,000 to Ms. Fleckel's class, and $1,000 to Mrs. Arnold's class. So we would thank the Pershawn family for their generosity in giving to these parts of our district. The work of the business services this month includes, among other things, preparing for setting the tax rate, the first payroll for teachers of the year, which will be out next week, and final preparation for the audit. We did have auditors in district yesterday and today. They've split their time up a little differently this year, so they spent 2 days with us this week, and they will be back the first week of October to conclude their field work. I think it's going well, and I am excited that they were able to get back out to buildings. They have not been to buildings since prior to the pandemic, so they are very comfortable now getting back out and just seeing what's going on in our buildings and talking to some of our staff. So I think that went well today. Team Liberty met for the second time this year on September 8th. We were glad to have Mr. Currents with us for that meeting. Thank you for your time. The team finalized their recommendation for the medical, dental, and vision renewals, and you will hear more about that later. And also included on that agenda was the discussion about Career Ladder. If you're not familiar with Career Ladder, the Missouri Department of Elementary and Secondary Education recently announced plans to partially fund this program, and it supports salary supplements for teaching staff to provide compensation for additional responsibilities and volunteer efforts that are not compensated in any other way. And since it involves a compensation, it was an item that needed to be discussed with Team Liberty. And they did have a good discussion about the pros, the cons, the benefits, the shoulds, the should-nots. And their recommendation, or they would prefer to monitor how the program goes this year, since it was such a quick turnaround to get the program in place and implemented, and a shortened window for the activities to be completed, designed and completed and monitored. So they have chosen to recommend monitoring this year and keeping our options open to do Career Ladder next year if the funding would still be in place as a possibility. So that's what they would recommend to you tonight about that. And finally, the Audit and Finance Committee did review their documents for the month and had no questions to pass on to you. Also, last night, they did meet in closed session with the auditor. That provides them an opportunity without any district staff in the room to hear what the auditor plans to do and ask questions if they have anything that they specifically would like them to look at, or any concerns about anything in the district that they might not be comfortable speaking of with district staff in the room. I think that went well. And I don't hear the results of that meeting, and I don't know what they talk about. So hopefully whatever they brought, you will learn about at some point when you hear from the auditor as well in November. And that concludes my report to you tonight.
So for Career Ladder, what would have been the soonest if Team Liberty had said, we'd like to pursue this? What would have been the soonest that would have gone into play for teachers who then have to document for what, beginning
So
whatever?
that process would have been that we would have had to add something to you tonight. So we would have had to have had committees gathered, plans made, and put in place to bring to you to approve tonight, to be then had that application filed with DESE by September 30th.
So they just met a week and a half ago, correct?
Yes.
Okay, so you wouldn't have need committees?
Yes.
In place?
Yes, and that committee
at the beginning of
would
the school year?
Been board members, committee member, or community members, teachers, staff. So it would have been quite an undertaking to get going in
7 days.
Yeah.
Okay.
Another piece to that was we were originally told when the legislature made the decision to reinstate it last spring that the guidance would be available by June. Waited. That guidance was not made available to districts until August 14th, I believe.
14th or 18th.
Somewhere around there. So I think therein lies part of the issue. The other thing I would share from the conversation with Team Liberty was a desire to really look into what might it look like if the district were to create our own program and then take the equivalent amount of money and provide some degree of remuneration in the event that the state funding isn't sustainable and subsides over time for whatever reason. And so then if you go back to districts that had Career Ladder in place prior to it being deleted or removed, some districts actually maintained that commitment and put their own version of that in place and still have it in place today. So I think that was the second area that we were going to try to explore to see what that might look like. So.
And how long is the state projecting that program will be in play?
They're not.
Okay. So it's like we're doing it this year and then we're going to see.
Yes, and the funding share was 40% for districts and 60% for the state, as long as the allocation holds to that amount. If every district in the state applied, then there would be a reduction in that funding share because the appropriation would not be big enough to sustain a 40-60 split. And the 40-60 split is a little confusing because that doesn't include any of the benefits on top of it. So the district would have to pick up all of the benefits on both sides of the share. So 100% benefits in addition to the 40% of
which then takes the price tag up.
Yes.
Considerably.
Yeah, the total price tag would have, for both sides, was about $4.8 million. If it were a 40-60 split, the district share of that is $2.3 million of unbudgeted funds at this point.
And as a reminder, all our money comes out of a pot?
One pot.
And so this would take it away from the pot?
Well, it would have to be prioritized however Team Liberty chose, because it does affect the pot of money that they have enhancements in and salary steps, rolling the schedule, giving increases. So yes.
Well, a big thank you to Team Liberty. I know that would have been a difficult conversation.
It was great discussion. I think they handled it well. They presented all sides very well and collaborated well together. So yes, they did a fabulous job. I think.
I would agree. I mean, they talked on all the elements that you've brought up and many others that they brought up. And I think to one of your points, I think, Angie, that you were getting at was that starting it now, if you went through the process, got it approved now, established the programs, you have basically a half a year to try to accumulate the hours to get there. And so that just adds one more complication to it. I think the realization that approaching it from a full year with the district being able to anticipate it, if it's going to happen, that's a better approach than to try to catch it on this half-year kind of cycle. So anyway, I definitely appreciate Team Liberty and the discussion that took place, because they talked all the way around this for sure.
And another key factor was the compensation study.
Mm-hmm.
And those results will come later this year. And as we always do, we know that it comes with a large price tag. We can't always do all of it, so then we end up phasing through it. So to Cindy's point earlier, it will be an important conversation, critical conversation on what gets prioritized.
Right. And that's how Team Liberty works, is they prioritize the things that they see as the highest need as to how to allocate the money that is available.
The other thing I'll say, because Cindy won't say it, is, and Mr. Kearns can concur, I'm sure, Mrs. Sullivan facilitated that discussion and did a phenomenal job. So as the fly on the wall in the back of the room, it was impressive to navigate that and the conversation that everyone engaged in. So.
Right.
Thank you.
There you go. Thank you.
All right, so to leave that conversation, I just noticed we've seen a bump, no surprise, in utilities and transport costs, which I know you called out in your report, so that clearly is important. Seems like it may have been slightly offset by a little bit of an increase in revenue versus a year ago, or no?
Revenue this year?
Yes.
Some of that revenue that you see offset this year is ESSER funds that were not received until this year, one time.
Yep.
And then if the tax rate passes, we'll see a little bit of a bump there with the reallocation of revenue from debt service to operating revenue, a small bump. I accounted for most of that in the budget process, but you will see that a little bit.
And utilities and transport costs, I'm assuming we're not thinking are going to go down anytime soon.
Probably not. I have not anticipated that in my projection document.
Sure. Fair.
What else for Ms. Sullivan? We're going to hear from her again here in a moment.
Yep.
So,
thank you.
Thank you. Next up then is 5.04, our operations report. Mr. Steve Anderson.
Thank you. Just a few items to cover in addition to what's in both the capital projects report and the operations report. First, I did want to recognize the work on the capital front that's been completed. And you saw, if you did have a chance to look at that report, and really wanted to call out Justin Preston, who's our projects manager, who kind of oversees to make sure that's planned well, working closely with Hollis and Miller, overseeing the construction process and making sure we're on time, we're under budget, and all that good stuff. So I did want to thank him and Steve Aldridge, who Justin works very closely with. Also wanted to mention that we did start this year with middle school sports, was mentioned a few minutes ago, and this year we did introduce AEDs for the athletic directors at each middle level building, which allows for those to be at all events on the athletic side. That was not occurring prior, and of course that does happen at the high school level. We thought with that growth in that program that was a good add. And then last, I want to talk a little bit about staffing, especially on the security front. You did notice that we did kind of go through a hiring process, and we brought in 8 new security officers, taking our internal armed officers from 6 to 12. They all been assigned. We have them in each middle level building now. And so we're just kind of starting to get acclimated and working within their buildings and meeting the kids, and especially the new folks. And so that has gone really well, and appreciate Gary's kind of oversight of that program. Kevin will be up here in a minute. Certainly we'll have some conversations around the facility master plan. But other than that, we'd be happy to take any questions.
Questions for Mr. Anderson?
Oh, just generally around staffing, how are you feeling at the start of this year? I know we made some changes.
It's tough. Yeah, it's just tough. I mean, I think in all of those key 4 areas that we see the most turnover, transportation just struggles. And most of their folks are office folks who mostly have CDLs or out in the field because of whatever's kind of going on with folks being out or turnover in staff or the hiring process. Kid Zone is another good example. We have, I think well over 100 on our wait list as we're just continuing to try to grow through that. Nutrition services and then custodial would be the other 2 that are just continual struggles. So I'm sure that'll show up on the compensation study will be, I think a lot of our folks are very kind of interested in the results of that analysis. But definitely an ongoing full-time commitment of our folks, the HR folks. We work very closely with them, appreciate all the work that they do. But it's tough.
And I know there's the wait list for Kids Zone, but is there any reduction in services in the other areas?
I think everybody's adapting,
Okay.
and you'll see some of the uptick. Cindy, it reminds me of the overtime costs, and it's just kind of this gaming of, I think, a good example is custodial. When we're down staff, we need to make the runs. We cut it down a little bit, but we work a little bit of overtime, so we kind of try to game the system a little bit to cover off the basic important areas that we need to handle. But it is, there's a cost to it. There's a time cost to it. But it's just part of who we are right now. Yeah.
And were there security drills conducted since our last board meeting? Or was
Yes. Dr. Moore can probably help with that as well, and that she's been working with our principals as we start the school year and trying to put a timeline to when those drills are conducted. Keep in mind, fire, tornado, earthquake, shelter in place, or lockdown drills, as they're also referred to as. You want to speak to that any further as far as timelines?
Sure. So they have they have to turn in all the drill dates to Gary Majors, that the fires every month. Most of the others are quarterly, but we did ask them to do the lockdown drill and review those procedures by, I'm going to say maybe last Friday or the Friday before. We asked them to make that the priority and get that done earlier.
I had a question about the facilities and grounds, about the leadership development program for entry-level managers to inspire higher engagement. I mean, do you have any other ideas of what that might look like?
I think it's kind of
pretty early.
It's something that we talked a lot with Dr. Vogelaar about before he left. But I know the commitment on the operations side is something I think we need to focus on. I think there is interest from the staff to pursue that, but I think we're kind of early on in that.
Sure. Okay.
Other questions of Mr. Anderson? Okay. Next up is 5.04, our Human Resources Report. We're going to welcome Dr. Mark Frost to the podium. I think many of you have met him already, but we have announced him as our interim assistant superintendent to help us out during this year, and he is joined by a great group in the HR department. I know Mr. Rosecrans is here this evening, along with Christelle Morgan and Dwayne Smith, who have been an integral part to the success of that team. So we appreciate Dr. Frost's willingness to step in. So we'll turn it over to him for a few moments.
Thank you. There are just three items that I might touch on. One is kind of where Steve was talking about the staffing. And we have had 141 classified staff members join us for this school year, 107 teachers. Now, with that said, we have about 55 support staff jobs still open, and that continues to be a challenge. Our focus right now would be on transportation. We've got about 10 bus driving jobs that we need to fill, and Steve and I talked about that early today. We also have about 10 para jobs, and so in the area of special education, and we understand that those are two of the primary roles, but we have about 10 jobs open in nutrition services and maintenance, so we have jobs open about everywhere. It would be great to start the school year fully staffed, but the job market is a lot different than it was 12 years ago as I ended my career at my last place. It used to be that you could hang out a shingle, you'd have 400 people show up, you could fill all of your jobs, and you had to turn people away. We had 3 recruiting fairs online, and we had one for today, hoping to have up to 20 applicants for the para jobs. We had 4 people show up. And so the job market is a challenge, okay? So that would be one thing. We have one sped job open right now, and of course we're kind of in between the cycles. We could have somebody relocate and move in, so we have that job open and posted, but in reality, Unfortunately, we're probably going to be looking at a mid-year hire or something like that. The second item that I would touch on would be something that you approved tonight in the consent agenda, and that would be the movement of teachers on the salary schedule. And we had 69 teachers that moved. It's a great thing that the board funds that. The cost of the school district was over $250,000, and the teachers that moved appreciate that and say thank you. So that would be the second thing. The third thing I would bring our attention to would be the Grow Your Own Teachers. It's a program, a plan to improve the recruitment of the minority teachers that we want to hire. And if there are some questions, I would call on Dee. Dee has been the champion for this program, but you would note that we have a group of 4 that are in their last year, and we look forward to having them on staff for next fall. So that would be a great thing. Great success. So that would be the 3 items. I'd be happy to entertain any questions that you may have.
So to clarify, the teachers that had movement were those who had gained, who had added additional hours to their certification?
Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
Other questions of Dr. Frost?
And just to finish, I too would like to thank the staff that has helped me, along with everybody here, but especially thank you to Dee. Dee has been a lifesaver. I asked Dee at one point, so how many years have you been at this? And I wouldn't ask you to care to guess, but it's over 50 years. So 50 years is a lot of years. And Dee has been in...
I'm going to file an age discrimination.
It was a recognition of service. But Dee has been in this school district for around 32 years. So a big thank. I'm super glad. I'm super thankful that Dee didn't quit at year 50. At year 50, I'm glad he's back for year 51. So, thank you, Dee.
You're welcome.
Anything else for Dr. Frost? Thank you very much. The last item then under our administration reports is 5.06, Superintendent's Report. So just to draw a couple of items out, a few of which have been mentioned already, just the, again, recognizing Epic Elementary for their Blue Ribbon School designation through the U.S. Department of Education. What a tremendous recognition. That was preceded last spring, as you will recall, by Missouri's recognition, and that is a status as a Gold Star Award recipient. So we learned that last year, and then this piece this year, and look forward to celebrating that in Washington, D.C. in November. Additionally, another recognition we received late last week was from Cognia, our accrediting agency that we've worked with for several years now. We went through that process in the winter of last year, December of last year, concluded that with flying colors, but we learned last week that we are again recognized as a system of distinction. We received that award 5 years ago, and again, we're recognized for that achievement. A couple of data points in and around that. There are 39 systems that have received that distinction during that window in which we went through that review process last year. All total last year, there were 1,500 systems that were reviewed internationally. And so we're in pretty good company, I feel, in those 39 that are systems of distinction. Again, some of those are on the other side of the world. We were talking about a couple in the Middle East that received that distinction as well, as far as Egypt and other countries. But we'll push information out regarding that press release as well with that Cognia distinction. With the start of the school year, we see increased communication and engagement opportunities. And so a couple to draw your attention to, we were afforded the opportunity to host the Liberty of Chamber of Commerce around the start of school, and presented a district update to them. Appreciate Dr. Adams for hosting that at the Performing Arts Center in that new space over at Liberty High School. Earlier last week, we also hosted our first in our series of Coffee with the Community presentations. Did it a little bit differently and leveraged Facebook Live. And so as we last checked, we were up to 600 plus views of that archived presentation. And so we appreciate Dallas and Caitlin putting that together and the technology department's help in hosting that Facebook Live event. We'll continue that series over the course of the year, but I know our fall focus will include 3 presentations in the month of October, November, and December. Our topic areas of focus will be an update from Gary Majors on safety and security. In addition, drug awareness presentation with specific emphasis on the impact of fentanyl and what we're seeing in communities across the country. And then when we come together in December, we'll bring Hollis and Miller back and our operations team to be able to provide an update on our facility master planning. And then we'll swing over into the spring semester and have an entirely different slate of presentations as part of our Coffee with the Community. Last 2 things that I would want to share from a community partner standpoint. We reconvened last week with our community partners meeting. That is a meeting that occurs quarterly among several of our larger community partners in the Liberty area, including the district, the City of Liberty, William Jewell College, Liberty Hospital, and Clay County Public Health Center. So William Jewell hosted that event in which community partners were able to provide one another with updates. And so we appreciated the opportunity to gather, thanks to several of our cabinet members and board members that were able to participate in that. Our turn to host will come back around a little bit later this year, and we'll certainly keep you apprised of that. Some additional community engagement opportunities include kind of refreshing our Vision 2020 committee and probably some rebranding in and around that group, but then also our DEI committee as far as our stakeholder committee. So be on the lookout for dates and locations of those meetings. And then something new this year has been a conversation that Mr. Ackerman and I have been having in establishing a key communicators network. And so we're working on a proposal, kind of the parameters for that group, and invitations that will go out for that, but we'll keep you informed as far as additional information and how we leverage key communicators to not only push information out, but solicit feedback and clarify perhaps misinformation that might be circulating both nationally at the state level or even at the local level. The last community engagement opportunity I had was actually in Jefferson City about a week or 2 ago, and that was with a couple of my colleagues across the state, some retired superintendents and active administrators, in presenting to the Senate Education Committee some of the work that transpired last spring around the Success Ready Students Work Group. We'll talk about that a little bit later in the agenda. But we were afforded an hour initially to present some of the work that's happening at the state level in conjunction with the State Department of Education, the Department of Elementary and Secondary Education. They ended up giving us an hour and 45 minutes with some really good questions. So we appreciate the opportunity to share the work that we're not only doing in Liberty Public Schools, but then also some of the work happening across the state of Missouri. With that said, would certainly open it up for any questions from you all this evening.
How did you get extra time? I thought that was unheard of.
It typically doesn't happen. So we took a 45-slide presentation and compressed it, and we had about that much time for questions that our legislators were asking of us. So it worked out very well. All right.
Okay, no additional questions into facility master planning under unfinished business.
So I want to welcome a familiar face to the podium, and that is Mr. Kevin Nelson, one of the leads at Hollis & Miller. No stranger to us, but as we've navigated these last couple of years in identifying what our demographic projections are, what our debt service looks like in terms of readying for when we might place another issue on the ballot, we've kind of made some progress, but then made some decisions to hold, regroup, re-navigate, however you want to phrase that up. But we're here again this evening as we've reconvened the school year to pick up where we left off last spring. And so appreciate Kevin being here and Mr. Anderson and leading that work. But we'll turn it over to Kevin to walk us through the slide deck that he's prepared for us this evening.
Great, thank you. Good to see everyone. Good to be back. Excited to get the master plan process kind of rolling again. See if I can.
See if you can master the remote.
See if I can master There we go. Okay. Needed remote training before we got started. Sorry about that. So again, we've got a pretty short group of slides for you this evening. I just want to take a moment, since it's been a bit since we've been together, to kind of review the process to date, kind of what we've done to date on the master plan, kind of go back through those potential projects that are still being considered, and then run through kind of what the fall is going to look like for the master plan. So again, our master plan process, we spent about a year doing steps 1 through 4. So game planning, just pulling together what the plan is, who we're going to involve. That step 2 is just figuring out what do we have to work with. What do our building capacities look like? What our conditions look like? So that's all in that step 2. Step 3 is where we really start setting that vision. So we had lots of planning meetings to talk about what do we want the future of the master plan to help support. And then step 4 is really exploring options at those potential projects that have been rising to the top. And then we're kind of in what I call step 5 is what's that plan that we want to adopt and how are we going to work through the adoption of that. So again, to talk about kind of learning what we had to work with and understanding the district, we had all these different opportunities to get input, to see the buildings, to understand what the priorities of staff, students, and the community really were, to work into those planning priorities, as well as be able to share some of those options through the exploring options piece. So a couple things to note, we had 1,500 plus participants in that parent community survey. We had 300 plus people come to some project review sessions, as well as about 3,200 views on Facebook Live. So Dr. Tucker just mentioned Facebook Live is really becoming a way that we can reach those people that may not be able to get out in person or in other ways to participate. So trying to find ways to engage as many people as we can. Another piece that came out of that original work for the master plan was to take a diagram of the district and understand where are our students when you draw a line in the sand. So this diagram was produced with last year's enrollment. So here in a couple of weeks, we'll be able to get this year's enrollment. I think September 30th is about the time we draw that line in the sand, and so we can update this diagram with that new information. But really what's important for the diagram to show us is where our students, where our capacities lying on the buildings. Some buildings may be tight on space, some may have excess space, and that's where this diagram really starts to show us. We want to compare this to the next diagram, which utilizes the demographic report. So tries to look into our crystal ball about 10 years out and see what do we think the trends are going to be for enrollment here in the district. Now, anything I can tell you is this is a pretty good guess, right? 10 years out on demographics is really hard to understand. The market conditions and other economic things can help drive this. But we do think, based on that demographer's report from last year, that we're going to have some excess capacity in about 10 years. So what that did tell us is we can focus on improvement projects around the district, program growth, not capacity growth necessarily. So it allows us to kind of understand what projects to maybe consider going forward.
Kevin, remind me on capacity. How's that calculated, that number?
It's based on how we're using the spaces within each building. So a classroom for a standard math class may have 25 students in it, but if we're using that same size classroom for a special education class with pairs and other things in there, that capacity may go down. So we do calculate it based on the use of each space.
Perfect.
And on the estimate, the 10-year estimate, like you said, the crystal ball, I guess, how do you base it on aging population? Do you base it on growth or projected growth? What elements do you have to try to add some confidence to
so the
that
district
projection?
did employ a third-party demographer, and so they go back and they do research all those things and then provide us with that document. So they do look at birth rates, they look at some of the other, like purchasing, home purchase, land development, some of those pieces to try to understand and predict how that might.
We can provide that to you, the most updated version.
Okay.
Yeah, it's a pretty lengthy report with all those pieces.
And it's usually
So as we looked at all this stuff, we initially had about $385 million worth of needs. So that list on the left was all the things that were the first set of projects that came to the top. Obviously, we knew we didn't have $385 million to work with, so our goal was to kind of cull that list down. And last spring, we ended up with about $143 million on that list and started to look at options. You kind of see in the column A, B, and C options on how we might start to prioritize some of those projects to fit within the bonding capacity that we had to work with. One of the things that happens when we kind of postponed or paused a little bit to consider a bond issue either from August of 22 to maybe potentially April 23 is that did add some additional bonding capacity to what we could consider. So going from about $145 million to $170 does help us look at how we want to utilize the bond dollars, as well as kind of what are our priorities within those project lists. So Right now, we're in a position where we're starting to take that project list and review those budgets. Again, it's been a bit since we set those budgets, so knowing that the market for construction right now is facing inflation, we are looking at those budgets to make sure that we can update those with appropriate inflation to be able to cover the scope that was expected, but as well as hoping to look at some of these additional projects, some additional security pieces, hopefully add the DMS gym performance space, LMS track, additional infrastructure projects, which could include HVAC, roofing, technology, maybe even looking into some solar and wind power pieces for some sustainability side of how we run the district. So those are some things that we're in process now of really kind of evaluating budgets and how they fit to that new bonding capacity. One of the things I want to also note is as we're doing this, we don't want to just think about this bond issue. We know that there will be bond issues in the future. And so we want to make sure that we're considering what potentially might be future projects down the road. Could include building replacement. We know some of our buildings are getting older and harder to maintain, and program growth is looking a little bit different too. So that's just one thing to keep in mind as we're focused on this bond issue, but we're always kind of looking ahead to the next one to make sure we're thinking ahead as best we can.
Kevin, real quick, and again, this of course assumes no tax increase.
Thank you. Great. All right, so we want to kind of run back through just to remind you what was on the docket before, and we have several groups of projects, and the first one we'll talk about tonight is just the district-wide infrastructure. So these are things looking holistically across the district that need some attention. First one on the list was that LED lighting upgrade. So again, improve that lighting in the classroom spaces, but also help us save some energy and save some dollars on utilities. Air quality HVAC upgrades, exterior roofing and exterior envelope upgrades, restroom renovations, as well as playground replacement for accessibility and safety were all in those district-wide infrastructure projects.
And these are all items that at some point are going to have to be addressed. It's just that we can take care of them with that no tax increase bond issue. We can start realizing some of those savings immediately, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. Next group, kind of district support services. So you see the first picture on there. It's just a very conceptual rendering, starting to look at some of the new buildings within the list. This would be new warehouse nutrition services building at the Southview campus for support services. We also had budgets for the renovation of the old Mid-Cotton Library for office space, some renovation within this building, as well as being able to take the vacated space out of the Kent Street facility and turn that into student automotive tech program. We had allowances for kitchen facility improvements, so part of that was looking at equipment upgrades across the district's kitchens, but then also specifically looking at Heritage and Liberty High School's kitchen scramble for kind of full remodel of those spaces, again replacing aging equipment, but also getting flow of students through there much more efficiently. Innovative learning environments had several projects kind of on this list. One, we had a district-wide allowance to look at spaces across the district, but then in addition to that, we had some specific projects like flex collaboration spaces within Heritage, fax and sped renovations at Liberty High School, and then looking at an outbuilding, or a shop at Liberty Academy that would allow them some space, some tinker space, some project-based learning space that they just don't have currently. In addition to that, some additional learning environments we had at Epic and South Valley, looking at that multi-purpose gym/performance type space. So again, just two quick kind of conceptual renderings of where those additions might start to happen on those two projects. As I mentioned before, we're hoping as we look at budgets that we can also pull in the DMS version of the South Valley gym performance space. All right, under the wellness and athletics category, at the top there we had a new aquatic center, so this would be district-wide, servicing the entire district for aquatics. We had new tennis courts at Liberty High School, as well as upgrades to baseball and softball at both Liberty High School and Liberty North. So that was the projects we'd considered. The last time we were working together on this, we do hope to consider some additional ones as we look at those budgets and pull in the additional capacity. So for this fall, just high level, we're kicking stuff off in September. Here, September's nearing an end already, and so October is going to be about that engagement, re-engaging stakeholders, re-engaging the list of projects, and really starting to kind of pull all the options together. When we get into November, we're still reviewing those options, but with some of that additional stakeholder input that we collected in October, and then gearing us up to hopefully adopt a plan in December. And what that does is that gives you the option to look at an April 23 election. Doesn't set it, but it does give you that option to consider it. Any questions on where we've been to date or where we're going this fall?
Just if we have any details about the plans for engaging the community, I know we've talked a little bit about some surveys. I think, Steve, you've mentioned that before.
Yes, one of the things that we are actively looking at in the conversation is our Let's Talk portal that we've used pretty effectively over the last year plus. We have engaged with them, and they are able to come in under our current contract with them, and they've done this in other communities. They did this in North Kansas City just recently. We really kind of open up a portal to engage the community in and around some of these issues and allow for some back and forth. We've not quite finalized that, but it's nice in that it's under our current contract. And they sent us some examples. It looks like a really kind of effective way. That'd be one piece of that. There certainly would be other kind of in-person engagement as well, but we'll finalize that in the next couple of weeks.
Is it a replacement for, or just in addition to kind of the phone calling we've done in the past? I know there's been concerns about how representative is that of the community, and are we getting the right people engaged?
And we're still actively evaluating if we would do that as well. I think definitely at a minimum we would do some level of engagement, kind of online engagement. That's where we've had the best return and most engagement. But yeah, we have some concerns in and around the effectiveness of some of the current surveying techniques that are out there, but we're still in conversation around that.
Okay.
And have there been any new update on discussions with William Jewell about aquatics and something broader than just a district facility?
Yes, we continued to have conversations with them. Last time was probably about 2 months ago. They're very interested, certainly to serve as a tenant. I think there's other conversations we had in and around partnerships and what that really might look like and the cost of that. So that'll be part of the work that we do over the next month or two.
Other questions for Mr. Nelson or Mr. Anderson while we have them? Okay, and just as we've done every time we do facility master planning, we'll continue to provide information to you through your Friday updates, but then also bring the agenda item to study sessions for a little deeper discussion, as well as convey engagement opportunities, whether they are seated face-to-face opportunities, evening or during the day, to make sure we can accommodate for all of our community, and then virtual options, polling, surveying, and so forth, as Kevin has alluded to this evening. So more to come in our facility master planning calendar for this fall. So thank you, Mr. Nelson.
Thank you.
All right, into new business, quite a slate here, starting with the 22-23 tax rate.
So this is a continuation from the hearing from earlier this evening, but then also working from really the beginning of the spring to present, as far as gathering data from the county, but then also submitting the appropriate paperwork to the state that then gets us to this evening and setting our tax rate. So we'll turn it over to Ms. Sullivan once again.
Thank you, Dr. Tucker. Tonight, based on State Auditor Office calculation data, we are bringing you a recommendation to set the tax rate for 2022 at $4.02 for operating, $1.54.77 for debt service, and a 36-cent capital project levy. The total levy recommended for the 22-23 fiscal year is $5.92.77, maintaining the same levy as the previous year. The 2022 assessed valuation represents a net increase of 8.2177% when compared with the assessed valuation of September of 21. The total assessed value for the Liberty 53 School District on which current taxes are collected is $1,494,125,314. New construction included in assessed valuation is approximately $87.5 million, which is a 33% decrease from the prior year. Local tax revenue represents approximately 44% of the overall district revenue budget.
So no increase in the overall rate.
Correct.
Just shifting some dollars from debt service into incidental.
Correct.
And we're comfortable with that. Just remind me why.
Because the load or the ask on the debt service portion of our levy will sustain submitting that penny, 1.17 cents, to operating from debt service while maintaining the overall levy the same.
Giving us flexibility to use those dollars within operating as we need.
Correct.
Any additional questions? All right, I move the board set the 22-23 tax rate at $5.9277.
Second.
Denise, when you're ready.
AJ?
Yes.
Dan?
Yes.
Kim Marie?
Yes.
Drew?
Yes.
Karen?
Yes.
Angie?
Yes.
Nick?
Yes.
Motion carries.
Into insurance and benefits utilization plan.
So 7.02, Mr. Matt Wheeler is here from Holmes Murphy. So as he's approaching the podium, we want to again thank Team Liberty for their work as they dive in each year and bring forward a recommendation for the board's consideration. This evening's item is presented to you for first read, in which we will go into depth with Matt's help, but also Cindy Sullivan, Mark Frost have assisted and worked with us very closely with Team Liberty and the membership to bring forward this recommendation. So we'll turn it over to Mr. Wheeler to walk us through a few slides.
Thank you, Dr. Tucker. Good evening, everyone. It's good to be here. I have the unenviable task of distilling 6 to 8 hours of deliberation down into 10 minutes or so, unless you're willing to grant the hour and 45 minutes that Dr. Tucker so generously received in Jefferson City.
Not that generous.
Well, I will not tempt your generosity then. So we will, if I can advance, then I'll at least cover what we'll talk about in summary format to share the fruits of Team Liberty's labors in considering the health, dental, and vision renewals for 2023. The rest of the lines of coverage were under rate guarantee for later years. So those are what we'll be primarily discussing tonight. We want to put some context around the medical renewal as well. We do not live in a healthcare vacuum, and there's lots of influencers right now that are influencing 23 renewals. So we'll talk about that so you can understand what has been, at least in Liberty Public Schools history, an unprecedented type of renewal, or at least pressures on the renewal itself. And we'll also just talk about the overall fiscal summary as well. At a high level, this summarizes the medical and the dental and the vision renewals. We will not spend any additional time on the dental coverage outside of this summary slide. Effectively, when Cigna wrote this business with the district multiple years ago, they put very heavy caps on the program. It's being used very well. Right now, the claims are still exceeding the premium, but there was a 5% cap on the coverage. That is welcome, so the cap was exercised, and that renewal will be moving on. We'll also touch briefly on the vision at the end, but primarily it's a discussion around the health insurance renewal and the pathways that Team Liberty considered. First and foremost, there was lots of utilization pressure on the plan. We'll hit on that in detail here in a second. To a substantive nature from the initial renewal release was in excess of 20%. Was where it was. In fact, it was 24%. 22% was our calculation was it would come out at 24. It was released at 22. Through negotiations over time, it ended up essentially being half of that position at 12.7. And ultimately, where Team Liberty made some decisions around some modest plan design modifications to try to incent prescription utilization in different pathways, ultimately that number dropped to 10.9. So we'll cover that in detail. The context around the environment that the renewal was released in is that this slide really shares what's happening in our overall client book of business. We have 500,000 member lives in our self-funded book of business, and what's happening is it's really unprecedented in my career. It's been a high watermark for year-over-year expenses in healthcare. Healthcare inflation's always been in the mid to high single digits. It's been in the double digits over the last 3 to 5 months. And that's primarily because this is 2 years post-pandemic. Year one of pandemic, we had decreases in services, we had delayed preventive care, and the rebound effect of that 2 years out is a return of services. And unfortunately, it also means that some of the dread diseases are further downstream than they would have otherwise been, which is driving expense. For the district in particular, that shows up in the inpatient allowed, basically acuity of expense. There was many cancer cases in the district, way more than, and way higher prevalence than in its history. So your data pattern was not overly dissimilar from what we saw in the rest of the macro environment. Much of the hope is that there's a bit of a reversion to the mean as we return to more of a norm over the course of the next 12 to 18 months. But that was certainly the environment in which the renewal was released, and the the district's specific data patterns really reflected that environment, if not a little bit worse for the metric that you're judged by. So the district basically has every claim dollar up to $150,000 on any member covered on the plan tracked towards how the renewal is going to fare. Literally in 12 months, year over year, that number is plus 17%. So you can see on this particular trajectory slide that it starts to go up in a very diagonal nature on the right-hand side of this exhibit. And the orange line on this slide really compares what the contractual target is within the insured contract with Blue KC. So if the numbers are over that contract before we get to the end of 22 or even into 23 and consider what inflation will be over the course of the next 12 months, it puts significant pressure on where the release was. So it didn't come as a surprise. It had been there, as you can see, for a little bit of time, but we knew it was something that was going to have to be wrestled with and dealt with.
Okay, a reminder on PMPM.
Per member per month. So every employee, and then as they're covering their spouse and as they're covering any children on the plan. So it breaks it down to a consistent metric for that indicator. So the fruit of that increase is that the district was also held to an 8% subsidy level. And we were ultimately dealing with a 12% health insurance increase. So what Team Liberty largely deliberated for the bulk of the time was a menu of options to figure out how to deal with a 12% increase in the 8% subsidy. So from a bookend standpoint, largely what Team Liberty considered was to absorb the increase via payroll for the subsidy would cover 8%, the balance would be all in payroll. Another bookend on the far right-hand side consideration was make as many plan design changes as possible that are tolerable in order to make any payroll impact as minimal as possible. And ultimately, it became very clear in the discussions quickly that making severe plan design changes really was not palatable for the committee as a whole. So from there, then, the committee largely zeroed in on one of two options that were just do this in payroll contributions, which was one pathway. At the time, if no plan design changes would have been made, that would have been for employee only. It would have been about double what ultimately was decided upon, $12 to $60 a month, $12 to $40 a month, depending upon which plan you were on. And keep in mind, 80% of employees are enrolled in employee-only coverage. So that would have been the monthly impact. But ultimately, what was decided by Team Liberty was to adopt a modest pharmacy incentive, part of which is already in existence today. There's an incentive presently that are on the plans to incent people to use either mail order or buy an extended supply of maintenance medication at pharmacies. And the reason why is as you buy it in bulk, it is less expensive versus buying what you could purchase over a longer supply in 30-day increments. So today, there exists a $10 penalty if it's transacted in that manner. Team Liberty ultimately decided to increase that to $20, while still allowing for the pathways for mail or for Retail 90 to avoid that, and also to implement what's called a generics preferred program, which is unless a doctor writes a script dispenses written when there's a generic available, then the member pays the difference. This actually impacted less than 100 scripts across the entire district, and in return, it really brought down the renewal by 1.1%. Now, there were certainly other plan design changes considered by the team, such as increasing co-pays across the board for office visits and pharmacy expenses. And ultimately, the consensus that was arrived at was just to meet in the middle and just implement the changes that were made, which helped accommodate a relatively modest adjustment in employee-only payroll month-to-month between $6 and $24, with some really modest impact from a plan design standpoint. There was also the decision made to implement a new plan option for members across the district, which is a standalone Spira plan. So that was done for a couple of reasons. One, it allowed people that wanted to access facilities at no cost the opportunity to do so. And secondly, given how the renewal shook out and how the contribution structures were positioned, it offered a secondary no employee-only cost for members to choose from. So there's still two plans that employee-onlys can choose from at no cost from a payroll standpoint, and so that plan design was implemented. I'll hit pause there before talking about the vision, because it's pretty straightforward, but that in a nutshell was the deliberations. Are there any questions I can answer for the board there?
I don't really have a question. It's more of a comment about for Team Liberty for many years, it has been kind of a guiding principle to keep one plan that's no cost to employees. And I think we're one of the last districts, at least in this area, that is able to offer that. So just kind of thank you again to Team Liberty that they've said this is what's important to us and we're going to figure out how to do it.
And I was in that that was the August meeting, and it was quite remarkable to see the consideration given to that. I appreciated it as well. That was a great process, and I appreciated Holmes Murphy's guidance on it.
Right, and having attended a Team Liberty meeting in September, they continued the discussion, and again, Ms. Sullivan did a great job of helping, again, allow the discussion to work around all the concerns that were voiced from a variety of people. And I think it was Heather Lee who, late in the process, recalled multiple plans and said, I think where we're at is one that we had thought was off the table, and it came back on the table, and it ended up, I think, taking probably an hour or two off of the meeting by making realization that there was a plan there that was kind of the ideal compromise, and it worked out well.
You can add something, Dr.
I just might add at one point. I think that the reality that the board is willing to pick up 8% of the increase really made, I think, a lot of the conversations more appeasing. Had Cindy not been able to factor that into the budget, had we just been able to help 2%, 3%, 4%, it would have changed, I think, the tenor of that conversation. But the fact that the board is stepping up with an 8% increase, I think that really helps.
Yeah, and to Ms. Graham's point, we work with a number of school districts, and there's districts we're working with in this particular cycle that are not able to increase their subsidy at all, and yet are left dealing with substantive increases. And there are not plan design changes that you can make that move the needle by 10 or 11%. They just don't exist, or you wouldn't want the plans that are remaining. And then the only alternative is via payroll. So there's no doubt that the fact that the subsidy could increase to that 8% level, it made the payroll impact as minimal as possible given the circumstances. And I think it really helped the team focus in really on the left-hand spectrum of our options, which were way less deteriorative in nature for the plan designs themselves. And yes, it was a thing of beauty that it all came together at the last minute for an option that had been off the table at the prior meeting, but it came together well.
I know, Matt, you're saying via payroll, just for our friends around the world who are watching. You're
Yeah.
talking the actual paycheck for our...
Correct.
Yeah.
Yes, absolutely. So for those employees that have a payroll deduction for employee-only coverage, that's what the second bullet talks about on here. The increase that, depending upon which plan option they've selected, the increase that they'll be facing every month, and this is for the 80% of folks that have employee-only coverage, will vary between $6 to $24 a month. For those plans that have a cost, there will be 2 that do not. Okay. Real briefly on the vision side of the equation, it's very similar to the conversation last year. There was a buy-up option implemented a number of years ago that continues to be used well. It provides value to the members that use it. It's an outlier in the vision insurance industry versus what most plans are, which it allows you to purchase contacts and glasses in the same year, which those of us that have some vision impairment would appreciate that, and a lot of members here do, and they use the plan well. What's happened is that the premium is dwarfed by the claims almost by a 1.6 to 1 ratio. So what's happened over the last couple of years is that there's just been a decision at the Team Liberty level to say, do we socialize the impact of that buy-up plan across all members, or do we just socialize it in a mitigated way to the buy-up plan? So last year the decision was just to pass it along to those using the plan. It was done as well the same way this year. And for perspective, we don't have it on this slide, but I think the vision increase monthly for those buy-up members is about $8 a month. So it's still providing value for the services that they're receiving. The plan is just taking a while to try to get back to a normative functioning basis from a premium standpoint. So that decision was made on the vision. That wasn't too hard to arrive at. And ultimately, the last one just shows the ultimate overall spend from a premium standpoint between those 3 lines of coverage is $15.7 million, of which 12.2 is picked up by the district. And that's all.
Other questions for Mr. Wheeler, or anything to add, Ms. Sullivan, Dr. Frost, that we've not covered off?
So we still have a contribution to the HSA if they select the high deductible plan, right? It's just gone down a little bit.
Yes.
Right? Okay.
Yeah, modified slightly. The HSA contribution is determined by the subsidy from the district minus the premium cost for that plan. So it decreased modestly.
And at least on the benefits premiums worksheet, I'm seeing that we've got the SpiroCare health plan bundled in there with that high deductible plan. Is the SpiroCare health plan also getting the HSA contribution?
So there's 2 plans that you can access Spira through.
Got it. Okay.
The new plan, which is Spira standalone, and it will not be HSA eligible.
Okay.
And it will not be HSA eligible because the IRS rules stipulate that you have to have some level of upfront expense before you can access services.
Got it.
Which the concept of Spira is that it would be no-cost primary care.
Sure.
And you can bundle a lot of services through that facility. So that plan is implemented on a standalone basis. Your high deductible health plan option, which is the HSA eligible plan that's indicated there, you can access Spira as well via that plan. You do have an upfront expense for it. It's at fair market value around $60, so there's an upfront expense for it.
Okay, that makes sense.
So 2 plan options that include Spira.
Yeah, that's good.
Anything else before we move on? So then, just as a reminder, this is the first time that you'll be seeing this information for first read. We will bring it back together to you in October for your consideration on second read. That then will allow us time to make appropriate enrollments, transitions, and so forth. If you have questions between now and then, please reach out to myself or Ms. Sullivan or Dr. Frost, and if we can't answer, we'll pull Mr. Wheeler in. But again, thank you to, I know, Mrs. Rogers, Mr. Currents for helping out with Team Liberty, observing that process, along with Cindy and Mark for helping facilitate those conversations, and all of Team Liberty to get us to where we're at this evening. This is one of their responsibilities that they'll plow through over the course of this year. So we'll be back here in this room on this topic come October, and can certainly leverage our study session if we feel we need to go a little bit deeper in any of these categories. So thanks for being here this evening and hanging out with us.
Yes,
So.
you bet. Thank you, everyone.
All right, into something we've been talking about a little bit, study sessions and Friday updates, Success Ready Students Network.
So we've spent quite a bit of time on this, whether it's just providing you updates or really spending time in our study session to talk through this. But just as a little bit of a review, it was last fall, I believe in the winter, in which the State Board of Education commissioned the Department of Elementary and Secondary Education to convene a work group to explore competency-based learning in particular. And so over a series of spring meetings, there were about 7 convenings that included over 100 stakeholders. That work culminated this last June in a presentation to the State Board of Education. I served as one of the co-facilitators, as chosen by the Department of Elementary and Secondary Education, shared those findings and recommendations, which were really in 3 key areas. It was to explore how to expand competency-based learning, research it, and move things forward in the state of Missouri. It was in addition to look at innovative assessment practices, both what districts are doing, what could be considered, but then how might we rethink state-level assessment, particularly the MAP testing and the end-of-course exams that are administered in the spring. The third category was really a recommendation on expanding real-world learning opportunities, and honestly, that was birthed from our area in the Kansas City area and the work that we're doing with the Ewing Marion Kauffman Foundation and expanding market value assets and access for all students, nearly 100,000 high school students in our immediate vicinity. In August at the State Department's Education Conference, a lot of the information was shared, and then the Success Ready Students Network was established with opportunity for districts to consider applying for 3 innovative zones, 2 for districts and a third one that are really for education partners. The first zone is a system design zone for those districts that are well on their way in these 3 areas, not necessarily having figured it all out, but working at varying levels both within competency-based, the innovative assessment practices, and real-world learning areas. So that system design zone is really considered that first tier. The second zone is an innovative learning design zone, which is designed for districts that may not be quite where they would like to be, but are experimenting or piloting with some of this work, whether it's a classroom level or a school level. And then the third zone is the innovative network as far as partners. It might be other state associations, it might be institutions of higher education that want to support the work and engage at varying levels. The application was due on September 9th for the system design zone for which we applied, and we were notified last week that we were accepted into that zone. And so then as a requirement to move forward, we've presented to you this evening a resolution. And it's a little time sensitive, and so it's presented to you this evening for consideration on first read in action, should you so choose. But as we've kind of walked this journey together, we've worked to try to keep you informed as well as our community on this work and how we move forward as far as our next steps. So we present that resolution to you this evening for your consideration.
Any questions about the resolution?
I don't have questions, but I do want to thank Dr. Tucker for your involvement, but not just for our district, but at the state level. I think this is all beneficial work, and appreciate your willingness to do that. And also, you mentioned the competency-based learning, and I was so busy grilling Dr. Moore with questions that I didn't get the chance to express appreciation to her and Dr. Westphal for the communication that has been put out at the beginning of school. I know there were multiple phase videos and things, and I think that was all very beneficial, and I think that type of content can benefit others. And I think, partnering for the state and with these types of systems so that others can see what we're doing, that's the type of just benefit that can really multiply. So appreciate that.
Thank you for that. And we've done a lot of refreshing to our website on a lot of different areas, from competency-based to the Be Smart program and other areas, and we will continue to do that as we design the work both locally and at the state level. It is definitely a work in progress and in areas we're going to learn from and improve upon. The other thing I would share that kind of dovetails with Mr. Currance's comments is that this work is happening at the state level with the legislature as well. With Senate Bill, I believe it was 681, or omnibus bill last spring, that establishes a competency-based learning task force. That isn't quite as evolved as to where it probably needs to be as some of the DESE work, but at some point we think these two parallel paths meet and converge. And hopefully some of the work that the task force will embark on from the legislative side will look to some of the work that the Success Ready Students Network is involved in.
Would you like a motion?
Go.
I move the board approve the Success Ready Student Network System Design Zone Resolution.
Second.
Denise, when you're ready.
AJ?
Yes.
Dan?
Yes.
Kim Marie?
Yes.
Drew?
Yes.
Karen?
Yes.
Angie?
Yes.
Nick?
Yes.
Motion carries.
Into 7.04, the LPS Nursing Academy.
Yeah, so as Dr. Moore is coming forward, it was about 5 years ago, as was mentioned, where we brought a proposal to institute AVID in our district, and you heard a little bit about that this evening. So we're here to bring another idea forward, and this is something we have been working on with a couple of key partners, namely William Jewell College as well as Liberty Hospital, that fits within that real-world learning space in an area that we know our workforce is in need of. So we'll turn it over to Dr. Moore to share this information included in our agenda for first read this evening. You'll see that one again when we get closer to October.
Thank you. As Dr. Tucker says, this came out of a conversation with Eric, I want to make sure I name him, Eric Blair, who's the Vice President of Marketing and Student Life at William Jewell, Lisa McBroom, the Nursing Department Chair, and then Jacqueline Gentry, who's the Director of Academic Partnerships for Liberty Hospital, as well as Colleen Jones. So we sat down about 4 months ago and just talked about the need for students in students' desire to go into the medical field, and then also the desire to give them more opportunities to do that. We have some, but not enough that fit our students' needs. There we go. So what we are looking at is a partnership with William Jewell and Liberty Hospital, and looking at seniors at the high schools who are interested in nursing. And so the students would take college courses on campus at William Jewell, and then they would also have a lab experience with a certified nurse. They would do that first semester, and then the second semester they would go into Liberty Hospital and do clinicals. So they would spend 75 hours first semester between coursework and lab work. So it's about 2.5 hours a day doing courses a couple of days, labs a couple of days. Second semester they would spend 100 hours in clinicals at Liberty Hospital. At the end of that, the staff at Liberty Hospital and William Jewell would help the students get prepared to take the test to be certified as a CNA. Along with that, obviously, then they would have a market value asset through the school district. The rationale for it, there's more in the proposal, but there's a high demand for healthcare workers. If you look at some of the attachments that I added in the proposal, there are currently 3,700 active openings in the Kansas City region for registered nurses, which is crazy. So there's definitely a demand. There's a high interest among our students by looking at Naviance and just the career interest surveys that we do. We have several students, grades 6 through 12, who are interested in the medical field, particularly nursing, so we know there's an interest. One of the questions that we discussed is, how is this different from maybe NCAPS or the Career Center? You're on a college campus, so you're getting ready for that next step, hopefully. You're earning college credit. You would earn, hopefully, that CNA at the end. Being a part of clinical rotations at the hospital right here is obviously that hands-on opportunity. And then employment opportunities, as Jacqueline Gentry shared, that if they have students who come in and really impress them and do a great job, they're going to want to hire them in order to be ready to work at Liberty Hospital in the future. So this is the costs associated with the program. It would be up to 20 students. That's all really that they can handle in the lab setting and then in the clinical setting. So we would cap it at 20 students. The fees per student, as you can see, the textbook, the resources, each student has to have a stethoscope, the blood pressure cuff, lab costs, would be a max cost of $3,960 if we had all 20 students. And then faculty cost would be anywhere between $10,500 to $14,000. So as a district, the cost to us would be around $18,000 for 20 students, and then obviously would go down for fewer students. And then the other piece would be student purchases. They would have to get scrubs for the clinicals. They have to wear black shoes, and then the cost of the state exam. We did talk about partnering with some Kansas City entities to get scholarships and grant opportunities, so that for students who want to participate but maybe can't afford the $200 to $300, that we would help support them with that. And then here is the timeline. So if approved next month, we will start working on having information sessions with William Jewell and Liberty Hospital at the high schools, and William Jewell College will start working on an approval for college credit for the students, begin promoting it more, having applications due in December, and then the Nursing Academy, which we're still working on the name, would begin in August of 2023. That is it in a nutshell. There's more in the proposal that you also have. There are some links, again, to the Kansas City area and why we feel like this is an area that we want to invest our time in, because we know that we need more healthcare workers in Kansas City and across the United States. Any questions?
Lots of work. Thank you.
What grade level would they enter in this program?
It would be just for seniors.
Okay.
Yes.
I would,
Go ahead.
I would think that it's going to be, how do you narrow it down to 20?
I think so.
And how are you going to set that criteria? Is there going to be like prerequisites? And then, I mean, even beyond that, I still think that's probably not going to be enough. And so then what are you going to do? And is there any way to, I guess, build this out for the future so that it can expand beyond 20?
Yes. So we have already talked about the criteria being similar to what it is for early college, but maybe a step up, because they're at early college, they're going and they're taking classes. They're not going into a hospital setting, to a professional setting. So using some of that criteria to build what we would want each student to come in with. So again, attendance, grades, just having a good idea that they can handle the workload. And then we have talked to them about the fact that we could start with 20, but we think that it'll grow. Just like early college, as Dr. Tucker mentioned earlier, we started with 20, and now we have students that we sometimes have to turn away.
But what would be that restriction on the clinical? You said, is that up to the William Jewell? Are there the limiting factor there?
It is Liberty Hospital.
Yeah, Liberty Hospital.
That is realized within Northland CAPS. It's realized within the career centers as well. And so we talk through, our 7 or 8 participating districts within Northland CAPS. You only have so many spaces where either hospitals or doctors' offices or sports medicine facilities or urgent cares are willing to accept students. And so rather than compete for that, CAPS helps cover that space. So to the original question, it'll start with 20, but will likely grow over time and evolve, just like those other programs have. But one of the limiting factors that you mentioned is the ability for the hospitals to place those students.
Yes.
And so whether you just want an internship in the medical space and you navigate Network 53 and go that route, or whether you dive into a more year-long commitment like CAPS, or whether you're taking courses for articulated credit through the 2 career centers, or whether you jump in to the academy, you've got quite a bit of opportunity as far as entry point. Even then, the demand is so significant that in the end, you're going to have jobs available for people to enter into, whether it's straight out of high school with a credential, or they have that leg up as they enter into a 2-year or 4-year degree program.
Of that 20, presuming we've got, good demand from both high schools, is the objective there to be 10 and 10?
Yes.
And next time when we see this in October, will we have an idea of what the application process will look like? Will we have something?
I can certainly bring that back, yes, absolutely.
That'd be good to see.
Yes.
I'm just so excited to see how our community partnerships have evolved to something that's not just beneficial for our students, and obviously that's important to us, but this will benefit our partners and our community as a whole. And that's a significant evolution in what we're accomplishing with partnerships.
The exciting part was listening to Mr. Blair talk about, getting students to come to William Jewell. Obviously, that's attractive, that if the students we have 20 students on campus and they feel comfortable, that maybe they will want to continue their work because they'll get to know the nursing department there and feel comfortable. So it's a win for them, and it's a win for Liberty Hospital.
And it's also a great nursing program.
And it's a win for us because our students are getting that experience.
The idea is that one semester at William Jewell and the second semester clinical placement, would there be any value into having the classroom both semesters available, even though a student might not get to do the clinical, but they're that much further along?
Yes, absolutely. We could definitely look at that, and I think that the other nice thing made me think of this is that with the clinicals, Liberty Hospital is very open, so if you have students who can't really make that work during the week because they want to participate in athletics or something else, that they can do it on the weekends. So that's nice to just give them some flexibility.
The other window that all of these programs are exploring or thinking about as well is summer. You've got that block of time, not for every student or family, but for some students, do you have a CAPS program in the summer? Do you have Network 53 working in the summer? Do you incorporate, an academy during that summer window as well? I think there's some potential there. Not sure what that looks like. Maybe that's version 2.0 or 3.0. But how do we leverage time a little differently?
The nice thing is in just that 1 year, they would have a minimum of 175 hours of time with registered nurses in a lab setting, a classroom setting, or a hospital setting.
It's invaluable.
Other questions for Dr. Moore? Okay.
Thank you.
We'll see you again in October. So thank you for that presentation.
To 7.05, the local compliance plan.
So this is an annual item in conjunction with IDEA, that is the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act. And we, as is typical, adopt the model compliance plan provided to us by the Department of Elementary and Secondary Education. You have a pretty good overview in the certification statement, that front cover that precedes the plan that's uploaded to you this evening for board docs. So just would present that for consideration this evening.
Clearly no changes noted or needed, I guess.
Yep.
From our standpoint. Okay.
I move the board adopt the model compliance plan made available by the Department of Elementary and Secondary Education.
Second.
And Denise, when you're ready.
AJ?
Yes.
Dan?
Yes.
Kim Marie?
Yes.
Drew?
Yes.
Karen?
Yes.
Angie?
Yes.
Nick?
Yes.
Motion carries.
All right, into 7.06, board policy revisions.
If you had an opportunity to read this board policy revision, there is one minor formatting change. And when I saw this brought forward, I asked Denise, "Are you sure?" And she called MSBA and confirmed it. And it is simply a change to an underline in a legal reference presented to you on page 12. Otherwise, materially, policy AC does not change. We felt that might be okay to bring to you for consideration on first read, so we presented that to you with some motion language for your consideration.
I'd like to have some discussion about it.
This underline isn't enough spaces.
How many spaces?
I move the board adopt policy AC.
Second.
Denise, when you're ready.
AJ?
Yes.
Dan?
Yes.
Kim Marie?
Yes.
Drew?
Yes.
Karen?
Yes.
Angie?
Yes.
Nick?
Yes.
Motion carries.
7.07, some contracts and purchases.
Couple of items that we've asked Mr. Anderson to walk us through this evening.
Thank you. Both of these are emergency purchases under policy DJF-1. The first, with Access Portable Air, we had some AC issues at Franklin. We had a compressor go out, I think, on the roof for one area. So we brought some temporary portable units. And then also we had some humidity problems at Kelly Brook, yes. So we had to do some remediation there. And both of those items were presented in a Friday update a little bit ago, and we appreciate their approval tonight.
Yeah, portable AC was temporary, right?
It is, but I think we bought those units so we
Okay.
can use them elsewhere.
Float 'em.
Okay.
In case the AC goes out in October when it's 90 degrees again? Okay.
I move the board approve the emergency purchases and actions as listed.
Second.
Denise, when you're ready.
I'm sorry, who was the second? Thank you. AJ?
Yes.
Dan?
Yes.
Kim Marie? Yes. Drew?
Yes.
Karen?
Yes.
Angie?
Yes.
Nick?
Yes.
Motion carries.
All right, the Board of Education section, starting with legislation and advocacy.
I have nothing. Not yet, anyway.
8 point, well, I guess anybody else have something? Legislation. All right, great. 8.02, upcoming meetings, study session, October 4th, bright and early 7 a.m., followed by October's regular board meeting on the 18th of October. The remainder you can see in there. Anything from a board remark standpoint?
Cannot thank Team Liberty members enough for the way they have had to handle 2 important meetings at the very beginning of the year while they are trying to get things established in their buildings in the month of end of August, beginning of September. So they save us untold hours of study and reading and questioning and pestering and whatever else we would do. So please pass that along to them. It is much appreciated.
100% agree. I want to just again say that I had the wonderful opportunity to congratulate Alex and Greenlee from Alexander Donovan Elementary for their recognition for character traits. That was last Friday, and wanted to thank all of our community partners who helped make that possible. That was quite a wonderful joy to be able to be a part of that, so I was very glad to do it.
Anything additional? All right, I move the board adjourn.
Second.
Denise, when you're ready.
You get to pick your God second.
AJ?
Yes.
Dan?
Yes.
Kim Marie? Yes. Drew?
Yes.
Karen?
Yes.
Angie?
Yes.
Nick?
Yes.
Motion carries.
You all.